Talk Live.
Welcome to episode number 9 of the Free Talk Cast. Real quickly, I want to give a shout out to Dustin Hilton, that is tonight's supporter of the Free Talk Cast. You can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/LRNFM. If you want to show your support for the Free Talk Cast or the Free Talk blog or the LRN YouTube or any of the other projects that we've started lately, that's probably going to be the best way to do it. Again, you can find that at patreon.com/LRNFM. So thank you so much, Dustin, for your support. I'm joined again this week by
Nikki.
And there's two things that I've been wanting to discuss. Well, there's one thing that I've been wanting to discuss for the last several weeks, but I don't like talking about politics.
Yeah.
And it's a political story. Of course, Biden did drop out of the 2024 race against Donald Trump. And we decided tonight that we would talk about that a little bit, given that we haven't really talked about it, to my knowledge, on Free Talk. Well, obviously, we haven't talked about it at all on Free Talk Cast, I don't believe. So I should stick with to my knowledge, or at least to my recollection. And on the show, we always get distracted and end up talking about other things. Last night, Chris and I we wanted to talk about Kamala Harris, and we ended up talking about felons and gun rights and how ridiculous it is that not having a business license caused me to lose the right to defend myself for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Which is completely crazy.
That is so crazy.
But because of that, we ended up not discussing it, and we may, in fact, do that very same thing here, because you had another thing worth talking about that is way more interesting and way more fun and way more ridiculous. Well, maybe not as ridiculous, but
ridiculous in a
different
different way, yeah. So scientists plan climate engineering experiment in the ocean off of Cape Cod. So you might be wondering, what the hell does that mean? I'd love to tell you. Scientists from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution are seeking a federal permit to experiment in the waters off of Cape Cod. And if you're not familiar, that's in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and it's not far from here, is it? Not
far from here at all. Maybe from where we're at right now, maybe 2.5 hours.
Okay.
So not far. So they want to see if tweaking the ocean's chemistry could help slow climate change.
Now, this sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you want to test what tweaking ocean chemistry can do to an environment, you should do that sort of thing in a lab, in a closed space.
Yeah.
So you can control for certain variables and find out, hey, what exactly is going to happen when we do this thing?
Well, I would assume that they started on a small scale like that,
true.
And then this is where they would get the idea. But the thing is, there are so many other variables and factors in the ocean. I mean, there's so much of the ocean that we've never seen, has not been discovered. There are animals and species and bacteria and all sorts of stuff, most of which we have no clue.
To say nothing of the fact that there's no undoing chemical changes to the ocean. And this is kind of a big deal because once upon a time in human history, in Earth history, the atmosphere was primarily carbon dioxide. And this allowed this little bacteria called cyanobacteria to flourish and thrive. And this little tiny bacteria, by almost single-handedly, changed the entire chemical composition of the atmosphere, creating oxygen in the process, ultimately evolving into plants and allowing humans and other organisms to come into existence. This one little bacteria was able to change the atmosphere just like that. What could this do if we just start dumping stuff in the ocean, hoping to see what happens? Now, we sort of did this. We did dump a lot of plastic into the ocean and a lot of trash into the ocean. To my knowledge, none of the stuff that we dumped into the ocean has really helped us any.
No,
at this point.
crude oil.
Yeah,
I mean, that
also
definitely
not
didn't.
Good.
Yeah, most of the things that have been dumped into the ocean hasn't really been good. A lot of the things that humans seem to do on Earth is usually not that great for the rest of the environment, unfortunately.
Or even that great for humans.
Yeah.
Humans have a really bad track record of doing things without thinking about it. And I think about vehicles and gasoline as being a great example. Like, we had no idea what effect gasoline would have if we were burning it in large quantities and filling the atmosphere with whatever byproducts there are. I suspect there's a significant link between the increased cancer rates and the rise of gasoline in the atmosphere and carbon monoxide and everything else that gasoline creates as it burns. Whatever effect it has, plus they say it contributes to global warming. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't really care. But the point is, we had no idea what would happen when we undertook this massive experiment where we just started burning massive amounts of gasoline and pumping it into the atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, even if, the other day I was actually at the beach in Connecticut, I was in Bridgeport, and we were driving south on the highway going towards New York City.
Yeah.
And you could just see, it looked overcast. I'm like, oh, that's funny. It got overcast really quick, didn't it? No, it's smog. That is all of the pollution from the city. So there are so many different factors here. We have the factories and then just people living, especially in those really dense populations. Out here in the country, there's more open space, there's a lot of farms, there's animals, there's more things to kind of balance it out.
There's trees to consume all of those things
absolutely.
and to produce happy oxygen as a byproduct, which is great.
Yeah, so it's just not great. So anyways,
Did you happen to see the video or photos a few years ago where Tokyo, I want to say it was Tokyo, it may have been Hong Kong or Beijing or something. It was some
one of those massive cities. Yeah,
where it was like yellow because of all of the smog, and it persisted that way for days. Was it smog and dust? I don't recall now.
Yeah, it was probably a combination of things. But either way, that's not normal. It's not healthy. It's not natural.
Yeah, what is that doing to people's bodies?
It's
we don't
probably
know.
Slowly killing them in many different ways. But I have a feeling that what these people are wanting to do into the ocean is far worse. So...
yeah, let's kill some people faster.
Yeah. The scientists want to disperse 6,600 gallons of sodium hydroxide, which is lye, if you're familiar with what that is, which is a strong base into the ocean about 10 miles south of Martha's Vineyard. So Martha's Vineyard is an island off the coast of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. 10 miles. That is incredibly close to Martha's Vineyard.
It is.
I mean, that could possibly...
especially for this volume of crap they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And let's explain that, because I don't know anything about it. I had to look up what sodium hydroxide was, and it turns out it's lye. And so I asked, well, what does lye do in water? And Google could be wrong and could be lying to me, but I've got this answer from multiple places saying mixing lye and water, also known as a lye solution, creates an exothermic reaction, also known as fire or explosion, that releases heat and fumes. The solution can become very hot, sometimes reaching 200 degrees. The fumes should not be inhaled, as they can burn the nasal passageway and airway, and it is a toxic chemical reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just... that I don't know why anyone would think that this would be a good idea, and especially to combat climate change. Let's do something that could possibly be extremely detrimental to the environment to combat climate change. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, I can't imagine that producing 200-degree clouds over, Cape Cod is going to do the environment any good. Plus, wind seems to actually move air around the planet. I don't know if these scientists know that, but there is this thing called wind. And those fumes, those toxic chemical fumes that they're going to produce in the ocean by dumping fucking lye into it, has a pretty good chance of blowing toward Martha's Vineyard.
Well, and also the currents, too.
Yes, also true.
So the underwater currents, and I don't know how toxic this stuff would be.
Probably not good.
I
what
just
about
don't
the
think.
fish?
I just don't think. And so when you mix lye with water, it gets really, really hot, right?
Right.
If we're trying to cool down the planet,
right? It doesn't.
why are we?
Is there not some?
Why are we increasing the temperature? I think what they're going with is they're trying to make it more alkaline. So I don't know if they think that the ocean is too acidic, and that's the problem.
Maybe. But I don't think that fucking around with the pH levels of the
it sounds
ocean.
like an awful idea.
Yeah. And what about the poor fish that are in this in this area where they're just going about their day?
Well, they're all going to die for sure.
They're having a good time, and suddenly they're exploding and they're burning to death because the ocean is on fire around them. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan of apocalyptic imagery, but when you want apocalyptic imagery, the ocean being on fire is a pretty good one.
Well, that's happened before, right?
It
With the oil spills.
Yep.
And that is just so crazy to think about water being on fire.
Yeah.
That's how you know you really fucked up. When you caught water on fire.
And in the Gulf, the massive Gulf leak from BP, did that ever actually?
Yeah.
To my recollection, they said that the oil just sort of vanished. They don't know where it went.
Yeah, it's probably, I don't know if it would like sink down because obviously it didn't just disappear.
Right.
Right. It went somewhere. I don't know if it just got diluted in the water. I have no clue, but it's still there.
Another thing that's still there that people like to forget about is the nuclear meltdown that happened in Japan a few years ago. And I don't remember the name of the place now, but if you research it and by research, I don't just mean watch YouTube videos, but you can watch some YouTube videos about it if you're curious. None of that went away either. In fact, that problem is still there. And at some point within the next decade, it's going to come to a head. And a lot of people are going to die as a result of it. Possibly. I mean, they could solve the problem. And maybe they have solved the problem since then. I haven't updated myself on it in 4 or 5 years, actually. So I say within the next decade, maybe that should have already happened.
Yeah, I would. So it's Fukushima that you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
I would
is.
assume that would still be radioactive in the ocean there, because essentially, like they just dumped a bunch of radioactive material directly into the ocean. And I know for a long time they couldn't eat the fish, and I'm sure the fish were all deformed. I'm sure a lot of people in that area got cancer.
I'm sure they did. And I wish I could remember all the details now. There are some really good videos out there that explain the meltdown process and exactly what went wrong.
Yeah.
But I seem to recall that the basis of it was that it was built too near the ocean, essentially. But don't get me misremembering things. Anyway, look into it. It's really fascinating, and it's going to create long-term problems just like Chernobyl did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was like a nuclear winter for how long?
Yeah, more or less still is.
Yeah.
There are people living within the danger zone now.
I wouldn't want to. Even if they got the all clear. I mean, it was so creepy. I watched a documentary about Chernobyl, and they walked around, and it looked like it was snowing. Just so creepy.
And I'm a fan of nuclear energy. Don't make me out to be like I'm anti-nuclear.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I love nuclear energy. These things just sort of happen. There were growing pains that came about in the early days of the industry when humans, again, had an idea and didn't think it through all the way, and this was the result. Mm-hmm. More modern reactors have been thought through a little bit more carefully, and we haven't seen a Chernobyl since. Well, we have seen a Fukushima since, so I don't know. Maybe there still needs to be some work done on exactly how this stuff is going to work. But regardless, it doesn't appear, I have no doubt that these scientists know a whole hell of a lot more about chemistry than I do. And probably more about the environment than I do. I say that because not every scientist is an expert in every single subject. And the ones that are experts in chemistry aren't very likely to be experts in ecology and biology and the environment. So they're probably not really the people to ask about what would happen to the atmosphere. Will this cause a hurricane in Maine if we dump 6,600 gallons of lye into the ocean? They don't know. We don't know.
So they want to start so this is a small test, right? They want to do the small test off the coast of Cape Cod.
6,600 gallons is the small test?
Yep. And then if it's successful, the team plans to conduct a larger trial next year in the Gulf of Maine. So they're acting like this is going to get approved, and they're already planning for their larger trial next year.
So it says if the experiment is a success, what does that mean? What are they trying to accomplish?
So they're trying to, let me see.
I mean, obviously they're trying to lower the temperatures of the Earth. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. I don't know if it's a problem or not a problem.
So the process is called Ocean Alkalinity Enhancement, or OAE.
Okay, so you're right.
Should temporarily increase the patch of water's ability to absorb carbon dioxide from the air. So they want to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. The first phase of the project, targeted for early fall, will test chemical changes to the seawater, diffusion of the chemical, and effects on the ecosystem. And honestly, only a year. So they're already planning their next larger trial at the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of Maine, sorry. But they're already planning a larger trial, it's going to take more than a few months to see what the effects of this are. So they have no clue what the long-term effects of it are. I don't think they can even fully study the short-term effects in a few months.
No, and certainly not the long-term ones. It's like radiation. There's no if you only tested someone who was exposed to some amount of radiation for a year, then you're not going to find out anything. It's going to take significantly longer than that for the effects of the radiation to become
Absolutely.
apparent.
Most people who are exposed to large amounts of radiation don't get cancer until years later.
And there's a really simple solution, guys. If what you want to do is convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, there's a really fucking easy way to do that that doesn't involve killing a bunch of fish and doing God knows what to the ocean. Plant some fucking trees.
Yeah, or algae. Algae is the
algae's also good.
number one source.
I assume there's probably some oceanic algae.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so those are better ideas. And of course, dumping a bunch of algae into the ocean is probably not a great idea either.
Yeah, exactly. You could definitely overdo that.
You're going to fuck up the environment in one way or another. But planting trees, nature more or less is able to accommodate that kind of weirdness, right? The part of the reason that we're in this mess is because of the massive amounts of deforestation that has happened in the past. At least that's what I've been told in high school. I don't know to what extent that's actually true, but if carbon dioxide is the problem, then trees are the solution. And I remember hearing on NPR a number of years ago, probably around 2004, 2005, where a study was being done that showed that trees were becoming both more efficient at converting carbon dioxide into oxygen, and they were growing faster. And it comes right back to the cyanobacteria thing. Well, not really. It's just natural selection.
Okay, yeah, that does make, just evolution. Okay, that does make sense.
The ones that are better at eating grow faster.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they produce more, and they produce more frequently. So over a long enough timeline, the trees that are better at eating and growing and being efficient will reproduce more than ones that aren't.
Yeah, well, and even when there's human interference, like when people are breeding different types of plants, like a lot of our food. I don't know if you've ever seen those pictures of, corn from hundreds of years ago, and it looks nothing. It's really interesting. They do corn. There's a few different fruits and vegetables that they compare it to, but essentially they look nothing like our modern day fruits and vegetables, and a lot of our fruits are a lot sweeter, so you could assume that they're higher in nutrients. So essentially this is the result of hundreds, thousands of years of humans interfering, or just gardening, right? So they're selective breeding processes to achieve the desired results of, the fruit or the vegetable. So it makes sense that people are also doing that with trees.
I'm trying to find pictures of corn in the past, but it's oh, here's one. Evolution. Obviously you can't watch this because you're listening to a podcast, but I don't really know what I'm looking at here. I would recognize two of these things as being corn, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm assuming that is in in order, in chronological order. But that's very
wild.
Similar, yeah.
I could certainly see that because...
And most food is like that. Most food has evolved into something completely different than what it started as.
Because humans like it a certain way, so we cultivate the ones that grow that way.
Well, it just makes sense. I mean, look at that first corn. It has 10 pieces on it. Yeah. So obviously, if you're trying to feed your family, you're going to want to selectively breed the corn for...
And
to be larger and have more nutrients in it.
Don't the corn kernels contain the seeds inside as well?
I don't know how. I think so. I don't know how corn works. I've never planted corn before.
Yeah, I never have either. I've heard
I'm
it's
not
really
a corn
easy.
farmer.
Or maybe it's not corn I'm thinking of. Maybe it's squash that's really easy. Regardless, I'm not surprised to see a result like this because if you just look back on anything within the last few thousand years, the changes are substantial.
Yeah.
Such as the United States obviously wasn't even here thousands of years ago, and the people here look nothing like the ones who were here 2,000 years ago. Yeah. Obviously.
Well, yeah, the Europeans came over, and then,
But natural selection is an amazing thing. I'm actually reading Richard Dawkins' book. It's not The Gene Machine. It's The Selfish Gene. Is it The Selfish Gene that I'm reading? Yes. And it's really fascinating to me how these physical processes end up creating DNA. Mm-hmm. And it suggests to me that there must be some sort of physical law that we don't understand yet. Like the laws of physics require these amino acids to come into existence and to thereafter form DNA. Mm-hmm. Like that would be a world-changing discovery for someone to uncover that law of physics that requires that. But it does seem to be required just based on the evolution of life afterwards. Like it's all about reproducing that DNA and keeping those genes alive. It's very fascinating. And Richard Dawkins, of course, is a fantastic writer, but highly controversial, because there was a study a few years ago done where a study that didn't even mention Richard Dawkins showed that he was the most hated scientist in the United Kingdom.
That's funny. I don't think I've ever heard of this guy.
Really, he was the one who wrote The God Delusion and a few other things.
Okay, so I've heard of that book, yeah. Just the name was not familiar. So why is he hated? Just because he's not a Christian?
I don't think it's that, because I think 95% of PhD holders aren't theists.
Yeah, I guess that does make sense.
But he is a really controversial figure as well. So and he writes things and says things that come from a perspective that most people don't want to understand.
Yeah.
So instead, he just becomes this lightning rod for controversy because he said something, and what he said was a little bit weird and probably a little fucked up, but he's actually probably right at the same time. Yeah. And people get mad at him, not for being right, but for having the audacity to say it.
Yeah.
And, fast forward of 30 years of doing that, and he becomes one of the most hated scientists in the world. So that sounds like a terrible idea. To come back to the lie and ocean story, I'm not terribly surprised to hear that that's what people want to do. But again, just plant some trees, grow some plants in your backyard if you're really worried about carbon dioxide. But just like cyanobacteria evolved and thrived when there was a lot of carbon dioxide, we should be in a time right now here on Earth. If there's too much carbon dioxide, plants should be thriving.
Yeah.
And what we have found, at least according to the study that I read or listened to 20 years ago, is that plants, in fact, are thriving. Humans just kind of need to get out of their way. When you look at New Hampshire from above, New Hampshire is covered in forests. It's an amazing success story because almost all of these a century ago were just completely gone. But now New Hampshire is covered in forests, as is Vermont. These things want to grow back. And with
absolutely.
With the amount of carbon dioxide we have in the atmosphere right now, they are good at growing back. We just have to let them do what they do. But how are we possibly producing so much carbon dioxide that nature cannot keep up? I don't think that we really can be. We just have to let nature catch up and produce the trees and the plants and stuff that's going to get rid of the carbon dioxide in excess. And if that doesn't happen, then humans will start running low on carbon dioxide and they'll stop being able to reproduce and eat and grow as much, and humans will start to die off. And thereby they'll stop producing so much carbon dioxide, and some sort of equilibrium will come into existence.
And that's the thing. There are so many climate change enthusiasts, we'll call them, who are...
Enthusiast isn't even the wrong word. Like, I used to be active on dating apps, and some of these people's interests and hobbies, they would put like climate change.
Yeah, they're like, what are your hobbies? Free Palestine.
Yeah.
Global warming. No, do you have any other personality traits?
Nah, they don't. Some of them don't. Like, if you're listing global climate change as your interests on Tinder, there's a reason you're not getting swipes.
Yeah. So,
might want to reconsider that. I don't remember where we were going before we got to...
So I was thinking about, this was a while ago. I believe I was on the show with Ian, and I just tried to find the article, but I don't know where this article came from. But essentially, it was going back 30 years, and it was all of the things specifically about climate change that scientists were wrong about.
Oh, yeah, because they've been predicting the end of the world for decades.
And they're like, by 2020, this isn't really one of them, but just to give an example, by 2020, New York City is going to be underwater, and they were just like very apocalyptic predictions. Yep. More like think less scientist and more like doomsday prepper priest mega
Right.
church vibes. Not so it's but every single thing they predicted did not come true. Couldn't be further from the truth. So it's really hard to take this stuff seriously because they've been crying wolf since the 70s.
I have a hard time taking climate change seriously anyway because I'm not an expert in biology and natural selection, but I do have a general understanding of it and the way that ecologies, what is the word I'm looking for? I keep saying ecologies. That's not ecosystems. That's the word I'm looking for. Ecosystems come to an equilibrium. Like the cyanobacteria, again, if there's too much carbon dioxide, they thrive and they produce oxygen, which allows other organisms to thrive. And the more carbon dioxide they convert into oxygen, the less there is for them to eat.
Yeah.
So they become less effective. I mean, they become less prosperous.
Yeah, there are these natural balances
Right. And
in nature.
That's exactly what we'll see here.
Yeah.
If humans are destroying the environment to the extent that it is not hospitable to us, then it being inhospitable to us will prevent us from being able to further
Yeah.
destroy the environment. And maybe it means billions of people die. That would suck. It would be tragic, but it would also just be nature's way of fixing the particular humans that are causing the problem in the first place.
Well, and that's the thing. A lot of these, I was calling them climate change enthusiasts. A lot of these people, they're so worried about the earth, right? The health of the earth. And I totally get that. I totally respect that. Me too. But what they don't understand is that the earth has been in so many different phases. Ice age, it's been hot, it's been cold, it's looked so many different ways. The earth will continue.
It will.
And humans have been on the earth for a very short time compared to, its entire existence, right?
Yeah, Homo sapiens existed
So-
for what, like 100,000 years?
Yeah, it's
I'm
just
not an
very,
anthropologist, so I don't remember the
very
exact number.
small, like a very small percentage of the predicted. I mean, I don't
Versus the Earth, which is estimated to be about 4.5 billion.
exactly, and like who
years
knows
old.
if that's true? But you would
It seems
assume
to be true.
Yeah, you would assume that the Earth's been here a lot longer than people have, and no matter what the Earth looks like, it will continue on. People might not.
Right.
But the Earth sure will. And the other thing I know is
Dolphins
all
will
of-
likely inherit the world. Dolphins, and God help us if cats ever grow opposing thumbs.
Oh man.
But dolphins, I think, are probably the leading contender to evolve sapience after
Yeah.
humans are gone. But that's only if we don't do shit like drop a bunch of lie into the ocean and
Yeah,
kill
and
them all.
kill them all. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What I'm seeing is a lot of the measures to save the Earth are usually backfiring.
Yeah.
So what, like electric cars? Oh, electric cars, they're gonna save the world. But
Well,
the
they're-
mining of the lithium batteries is actually so detrimental to the environment. And then throwing like
It's also causing child labor.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, excuse me, it's not child labor,
Slave.
it's child slavery.
yeah, actual slavery.
Like 12-year-old, 10-year-old children are being worked to death in
Yeah.
lithium mines so that you can have your electrical vehicle.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm proud to say that the car I just bought is 100% gasoline, gets
Yep.
22 miles per gallon, just the
Yay.
way I like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, these problems will solve themselves. One of my favorites is hearing about the Great Barrier Reef or the coral
Yeah.
reefs. They're dying out, they're dying, and it's terrible. Like, yeah, and that sucks.
Yeah.
But it's not like that's the only coral reef that is ever going to exist. Yes,
Yeah.
it was great in its time and it was beautiful, but its time has passed and now it's dying.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future there will be a Great Barrier Reef of New Mexico, or of Mexico, or of the Gulf of Mexico, or off the coast of California, or wherever. Like, we don't know what the future holds.
And
But
we
it
also
could be-
don't know, because I think they were saying it was because of the acidity. So this is what they're trying to combat with this thing we were just talking about. They want the water to be more alkaline. But do we really know that for a fact, that wouldn't have happened eventually?
No.
Do we know that it isn't a natural process, that the ocean is becoming more acidic or the climate is changing? Maybe the climate really is changing. Maybe it really is getting warmer. But that could also just be the natural patterns and the rhythms of the earth. Maybe that could have happened whether humans are here or not. Maybe we are speeding it up. Maybe we're not. I don't know.
I tend to think it's
But-
probably arrogant for humans to believe that we are speeding it up. And this was an argument I put forward. This is why I learned about cyanobacteria, in fact, because that was my argument. I was like, dude, we are a meaningless player on this planet.
Yeah.
The planet, it doesn't care about us at all. And It's just sheer arrogance allowing humans to think that we can change the entire planet's atmosphere and climate. But this little bacteria was able to do it billions of years ago. I tend to think humans probably could, but I don't think we have. I don't think that's really what's going on here. I think we have pumped a lot of carcinogens into the atmosphere by burning gasoline. I don't have an issue in and of itself with burning gasoline. Like, we got to get around. I'm not anti-car. I'm not anti-burning gasoline. I'm just saying, hey, guys, this thing we did seems to have had a consequence.
Yeah, there's a cause and effect to everything.
So don't be surprised when the cancer rates continue to go up, because we are continuing to dump carcinogens into the atmosphere, so people are getting cancer. But it's going to be fine. And as far as I can tell, being a nihilist, it's a really good counterbalance to the medicines that humans have created over the last few centuries to help us live longer, which would obviously cause overpopulation at a certain point. If people aren't dying out the way that they're supposed to, and they're still having children at the age of 16, 17, and 18, because most of the people that I grew up with, they had children well before they were 21 at the very least. And most people do seem to have children at an age that's earlier than I think is probably a great idea, but it's not my business. I'm not them. They do them. If we continue having children at these rates, though, and people aren't dying off at the rates that nature expects them to die off at, then you do, one way or another, end up with overpopulation. By overpopulation, I don't mean that the planet doesn't have enough ground to support us. I just mean that we've created an imbalance in the ecosystem.
Do you think we have overpopulation right now?
Not really. We have created an imbalance in the ecosystem, but it is one that could be solvable if we weren't fucking idiots about some of it. Like, there's plenty of arable land out there, and there's plenty, like, stop living in the desert. You people who are dying of starvation, get out of the fucking desert. Go where you can grow some food.
But even people in the desert aren't even dying of starvation because food's being shipped to them.
Also true.
Right? But I always think of that from a like a homesteading perspective, because you can drill for water in the desert, but it's very expensive and you're probably not going to get a lot of it.
Well, I think the way to go in the desert would be an
garden.
artesian well, which is what Vegas did.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the specifics of this now. I looked into it when I lived
We
in
can do
Vegas.
like water collection to the earth ships where they only get where the earth ships were, they only got, I think, an inch of rain or maybe 3 inches. It was like ridiculously low, but they were able to catch, filter, and that was, with what very little rain they got, they were able to survive off of it. But you have to get
gross.
You have to get like real creative. Well, and part of the Earthshift design is reusing the water 3 or 4 times. So first you have like drinking water, and then so anything like you're using when you flush the toilet, that's going into the garden, and it's going to be like fertilizer type stuff. And then when you wash your hands in the sink, anything that goes down the drain in the sink goes in to flush the toilet. So it's like a multi-level system of recycling the water. Which
isn't bad.
No, it's not terrible, but it is kind of, you know what I mean? It's not like the typical way that we would do things.
It's not, but like it is, if we did not have enough water to support the amount of life that we have here on the planet, then that would be a good solution to some of these problems. But it seems like water shortage isn't an issue that we have here on the planet, unless these idiot scientists manage to destroy the ocean or set the entire ocean on fire, which seems unlikely with only 6,600 gallons of lye, but I don't really want to know what it's going to do. And by that, I mean, if they're going to do it, I do want to know the result. But I would rather them not do it and just leave the question hanging forever whether or not that would have worked. The solution is so much simpler than dumping lye into the ocean. Just plant some trees, guys. Like, really, you're taking a lot of steps here that aren't necessary.
Yeah.
If we lived in a world where you could not plant trees, I could understand where you're coming from. Like if we were on Mars and you needed a way to combat the climate change there, okay, do that with the artificial ocean that you've created. But we do have land here that we can, grow trees on. And those will convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, just like the ocean does. And you don't have to drop 6,600 seeds, tree seeds, whatever they're called, into the ground, maybe. Yeah. That seems like it would probably be more effective as a result if your goal is to turn carbon into oxygen.
Yeah.
So that's the lesson for today. Keep it simple, stupid, I suppose. These scientists are too busy wondering what they could do to think about what they should do.
Yeah.
And like, again, if you want more oxygen, what you need is trees, not lye being dumped into the ocean. Thanks for listening. See you next week.